All right, Alexander, let's do an update as to what's going on in Ukraine. On the ground, you may want to get into it very quickly, but things are pretty stable. I would say that as per our last update on Ukraine, it is the multiple offensives that the Ukraine military is undertaking right now. Multiple small counteroffensives. Krasny Lyman is the one talking point, I guess. And you did an excellent video where you described how it's not even that big of a I want to say issue, but anyway, you may want to touch upon it, Krasny Lyman, because that's kind of absorbed a lot of people's discussion with regards to what's happening on the ground. The real big story, I think, outside of the referenda and everything going on there, which you may also want to touch upon, in my opinion, are the recent appearances of both Jake Sullivan on CBS Face the Nation and Anthony Blinken on 60 Minutes yesterday. And they both said pretty much the same thing, which is that should Russia attack Ukraine, the collective West, should they use a nuclear weapon, then we have let Russia know publicly and privately that the consequences for Russia will be devastating, catastrophic, choose your words. I'm trying to figure out why both of them are twisting the words of Putin's speech, because I've gone through that speech. I've probably read it 20 times. And unless I'm missing something, there is not one instance in that speech where Putin says, we're going to use nuclear weapons. As a matter of fact, that speech pretty much to me just reiterates Russia's security and nuclear doctrine, which is if we're attacked with weapons of mass destruction, we'll retaliate. I don't know, maybe I missed something in that speech. Maybe but I've read it like 20 times and I just don't see any of that wording there that Blinken and Sullivan are telling us. So I'm trying to figure out why are they zeroing in on that specific part of that 14-minute speech? Are they huffing and puffing and just trying to freak out everybody, a little bit of fear mongering? Are they projecting? Are they trying to create an Iraq WMD narrative for something else? I don't know. I want to hear your thoughts, but start off the video wherever you would like.
Yeah, I'll do it quickly because I agree we need to focus on the nuclear thing because that is getting very alarming and very worrying. But I'll do it quickly with the military situation. Well, you're absolutely right. Ukraine's offensive is fizzling out on every front where it was launched. I gather now there's even some reports that there is indeed some kind of pushback by the Russians in Kharkiv region, that they're sending troops west of the Oskol River back into Kupiansk, western Kupiansk. All very sketchy. We can't really say whether that's the case. There's been a very interesting article in the New York Times of all places. They went to Kherson region, obviously hoping to find news of some great Ukrainian victories there. What they're learning instead, what they're hearing about, is of massive losses. Massive Ukrainian losses. What we've been reporting about for weeks. One Ukrainian soldier said that his unit lost 50 men in 2 hours. 2 hours. And another a Ukrainian medic said that when wounded people come from the battlefields, almost none of them are wounded with small arms, with bullets and things like that. It's nearly all from shells and missiles and rockets. They're not getting even close to the Russians in Kherson region. They're being killed in huge numbers under relentless Russian missile and artillery attacks. And even the New York Times is now confirming that. So the one place where there's some flickers of offensive action is in Krasny Lyman, which is this this small town in northern Donetsk. Now, after the Kharkiv counteroffensive, the Ukrainians tried to capture it because they saw it as a gateway into northern Lugansk region, which is one of these two breakaway regions in the Donbass. And they were hoping to move through Krasny Lyman into Lugansk and perhaps even, threaten Severodonetsk and Lysychansk and try and somehow reverse the course of the war there. In fact, what happened was that they weren't able to take Krasny Liman quickly. The resistance there proved to be much too strong. And in spite of the fact that the time window to launch an offensive against Lugansk region is now closing, because the Russians have reinforced in Lugansk region, they've set up other defense lines, and of course the weather is now changing. We've got the autumn rains coming, all of those things. There's no real logic any longer in trying to capture Krasny Liman, but they're still trying to. It's now become almost like an end in itself to take this not very important Donetsk town in order to show that you're achieving some kind of effective outcome, some kind of outcome, that you're still advancing on the battlefields. And once again, the information we're getting is that the Ukrainians are suffering horrendous losses, throwing more and more men, trying to take Krasny Liman. It's beginning to turn into something a little like what we see in Kherson region, where Ukrainian tanks and Ukrainian troops are sent into battle and just are blasted from a distance by Russian artillery, and they're forced back, and then they're thrown back into the battle again. And this goes on and on and on in an effort to take a place which, whatever significance it had 2 or 3 weeks ago, has lost it now. So that's where we are on the battlefields. In all other respects, I think we are in the quiet before the storm in terms of movement. I think we're going to see the effect of the referendums, the fact these territories will be incorporated into Russia, the movements of the Russian army, the call up of reserves, all of that in a few weeks' time is going to change the entire character of the war. But let's leave those developments to another day. These nuclear things are becoming extremely worrying. Now, can I say this has been a constant chatter, a theme that we've been getting in the British American medias, especially about Putin having made nuclear threats. It goes back all the way to the start of the war in February. And then you go and look through Putin's comments, and you find, just as you've just been doing by looking at his latest speech, that he made no threats at all. He merely restated Russian policy. If there is an attack on Russia with weapons of mass destruction, and he said that the Russians had been getting threats to that effect, which we'll come to in a moment, then they are in a position to respond in kind. That's all he said. He absolutely did not say that Russia is looking to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine itself. He has never said that. He's never hinted at it. And Russian officials have gone on record as saying clearly that it isn't planned. It won't happen. So, I mean, this is a completely false narrative that somebody has been very zealous in trying to build up. But we have learnt, thanks to the Washington Post, something else, which is that the US, when I say the US, I obviously mean the administration, has been sending to Moscow apparently a cascade of warnings in inverted commas, and this has been going on for weeks apparently, threatening grave consequences if the Russians ever do what they have always said they have no plan to do, which is use nuclear weapons in Ukraine. And that must be very concerning for the Russians, because why are they getting these warnings all the time when they've never actually made the threat that these warnings are supposed to deter? Well, I can't help but think that some people in Moscow are saying to themselves, in fact, I've no doubt that they're saying to themselves, and I've no doubt that some people in Washington intend that the Russians to start thinking and worrying themselves, that these warnings aren't really warnings. They are coded threats that if Russia oversteps in some way in Ukraine, if it does something in Ukraine that goes beyond some unknown red line, which the United States has never made clear, then the United States is prepared to counter that by using nuclear weapons itself. And that is why Putin gave that warning in his speech on Wednesday. And I suspect that these further statements by Sullivan and Blinken are once more intended to reinforce those threats to the Russians, but they're also intended somehow, I think, to move the envelope, to make it look like the threats are coming from the Russians, the threats to use nuclear weapons are coming from the Russians, when actually, if you look at the whole situation altogether, these threats, very ambiguously and kept purposely vague, but they look increasingly more likely that they're coming from the US.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well. I was thinking this reminds me a lot of Iraq WMDs. You know, they've got weapons of mass destruction. They got weapons. Saddam is saying, we don't have weapons. Bring in inspectors. We don't have weapons. No, you've got weapons. You've got weapons. And then one day, we're invading. This is what this reminds me of. I just get the sense that Blinken and Sullivan and the Department of State, the State Department, they're desperately trying to build this narrative, and they zeroed in on that speech from Putin, and they twisted it so that they can further advance this narrative that Russia is intending to use weapons of mass destruction, so that the United States can then come along and say, we know they're going to use WMDs. We know they're going to use WMDs. Oh, take a look at what they did yesterday. They attacked critical infrastructure in the west of Ukraine. That's it. We need to hit them. I mean, this is the very scary and terrifying sense that I'm getting, and this is without a doubt the most dangerous freaking administration I've ever seen in my entire life. I've never seen an administration more dangerous than these guys.
I agree with every point that you've made. I mean, making repeated warnings to Moscow, warnings about something which they know doesn't exist, but which involves nuclear weapons, and threatening grave consequences when everybody knows who thinks about this, that this is effectively a threat to use nuclear weapons. I mean, this is so reckless. I mean, I've never known anything like this to happen before. I mean, never in my lifetime has an administration, a US administration, acted in such a reckless way. And clearly the Russians are concerned, because that's why Putin gave that warning, which he did. And it was a warning, it was not a threat, because he made it very clear that the Russians would only respond if something like that were done to them. But he did remind everybody that they do have the power to carry out such a response. But to me, it almost suggests that if Ukraine looks like it's about to lose the war, the United States is willing to intervene in some form, perhaps up to and including the use of nuclear weapons. Now, I'm not saying that's the plan. I'm not saying that's the intention. But it's the sort of message that the Russians might be getting from this. And your WMD point is absolutely right, because it creates a fictitious threat. It creates a fictitious threat in order to justify what looked like the most drastic action, which could very well be exactly what we've talked about, so that if the Russians look like they're about to take Kiev, for example, that the United States says, that this is a moment of supreme danger, and that the United States is justified in intervening in some way. So, I mean, I find this extremely unnerving, and I wonder whether it's been orchestrated. When you say it's been orchestrated, I mean, it was the headline issue in the Financial Times, the headline story in the Financial Times, a newspaper which is clear to me is very close to the administration. And it spoke about Putin threatening to use nuclear weapons against Ukraine, which he never did. But it was stated as if that was what Putin had actually said, misrepresenting the words of a leader of a nuclear power on an issue like that. I find that astonishing. But anyway, they are orchestrating it. They are building it up. They're trying to create a narrative here. And I have to say, it is extremely worrying. And as you rightly said also, this is the most dangerous administration I can ever remember.
I mean, we've got the speech. It's on the Kremlin website. It's there. We got the whole speech in English. And I've gone through it, and he doesn't issue any such threat. He doesn't say, I'm going to use nukes here, there, and there. He doesn't say that at all. At all. And we've all got it, but it seems like they're manipulating. They're in overdrive trying to manipulate the words and the speech and the statements, and they're turning them upside down, inside out. And I say to myself, why are they doing this? That there must be a reason to this manipulation. And I'm afraid that the only reason I can think of is that the State Department, because I really do think a lot of this originates at the Department of State, that they've resigned themselves to the fact that they're going to lose. This Ukraine project is going to be lost, and we're going to take this all the way if that is the case. I mean, that's. Is there anyone in the Pentagon that could stop them? I mean, I know there are good people at the Pentagon, like clear-minded people there. I know there are. Is there anyone in this empty suit, this empty Biden White House? Is there anyone there that can go against these neocons in the State Department and tell them, it's over, guys. Your Ukraine project is over. It's done. We're moving on.
I have to say the truth. I don't think there is. I think if the pushback comes, it will have to come from the Pentagon. The only thing I will say, and this is the one comfort in this thing, I think that pushback will come from the Pentagon. I think the Pentagon will say, if they're pushed into that situation, you people have taken leave of your senses, and this is an order. If they ever get an order like that from the president, they'll simply say, well, we're not going to carry through with that order because this is clearly such a ludicrously insane order that it's not an order we can carry out. So but I don't personally think we'll even get to that point myself. What it does show, however, as you absolutely rightly say, is that even as their project falls apart, which it is doing, these people's instinct is to double down and triple and quadruple and to start raising the stakes to almost recklessly high levels. As I've said so many times, they have no reverse gear.
All right. Any final thoughts before I wrap it up?
No, I want to end on a reassuring note. I don't think we're going to get there. I think that there will come a point where even, as I said, well, the Pentagon will certainly push back. I don't think the American people are signed up for this at all. I think there'll be a lot of people in Europe who will be horrified if they learn about this, even within governments that have been supporting these policies. But this episode exposes clearly how dangerous these people are. It is terrifying that they're as close to the levers of power, in fact, that they're pulling some of the levers of power as they actually are. And the sooner they're thrown out and the door is locked forever against them, the better it will be. I think we'll get through this. In fact, I'm confident we will. But my goodness, I never expected to see anything like this in my life.
Yeah. We can't get to midterms fast enough, and we can't get to 2024 fast enough. Really.
Absolutely.
I mean, this is incredible stuff. All right, we will leave it there. TheDuran.locals.com and Duran Shop. 10% off. Use the code. Good day.